Okay, I'm doing a pressure test on this car because an old video of mine, somebody had commented on it and it brought up another comment, and being a little neurotic, I guess, it, bothered me. And it said that when you change the coolant bypass hose in the middle of the valley of this engine, always, reseal the coolant plate. And I agree with the commenter. At the time I did the repair, it was the largest, most complex repair I had done up to that point. I had done some suspension work, so I wasn't, by no means, I was a very early DIY mechanic. If I redo the job today, obviously I would reseal it. But at the time, I wasn't, I didn't realize that use form in place gasket. I never used form in place gasket. I've since done it on the oil pan, so I'm pretty confident I could do it today. It was also a job that was out of necessity. The pipe burst, and I needed to, I didn't have a running car at the time, so I needed to just get it back up and running. And it wasn't like a part number. I bought the gaskets for the intake plenum and, all the little gaskets. I redid the O-rings on the fuel injectors, which people have said, oh, you didn't need to do that. Whatever, I did it. They were hard and crusty, so they're, probably never need to do them again. But I didn't, and I'd been noticing that from time to time, the coolant in the reservoir would go down, after an extended period of time. So I'm like, well, let me do a pressure test. So I got a pressure tester yesterday. That was the only drive I did. I drove, I got it, and then maybe like 4 or 5 hours later, I put the pressure tester on. So the car was cool in the sense that it wasn't pressurized, and I wasn't going to hurt myself with hot coolant, but it was still warm. And I have it in this garage, and I think cars take longer to cool off in a garage because there's a lack of airflow. Either way, I put it on, and it didn't immediately lose pressure, but it did after like 10 minutes or so start to drop a little bit. I think it lost maybe like 2 psi over the course of 30 minutes. And I'm like, oh boy. And I kept checking. And let me see if I can show you here. So what you're going to see in the following 2 clips, these were done yesterday because I actually used a toothbrush to kind of clean a little bit of the pink residue that you're going to see in these clips. The first clip is from this angle, from the back of the engine, so you kind of see the back of the coolant plate. And then the second video is looking straight down, kind of right there, and that's where you're going to see the most pink residue. It's an area of concern on this engine, that coolant plate, obviously, when it's at this age, which all these engines are going to be at around that age. So if you're doing that job, definitely do it. And there's actually an ASIN gasket, form in place gasket, which seems like it would be the best choice. That if I were to do it, that's the one I would use. So we see this thing is still, it's holding pressure. It's getting it at the right angle. If you look at it here, it looks like it's above 15. If you look at it there, it's below, but it's around 15 psi. And this video will be kind of a testament to whether it's holding pressure or not. So what was interesting was, so the car was warm, and then the pressure was dropping, and I'm like, well, let me make sure the tester isn't losing pressure. And the tester was weird. At first it looked like it was, and then I re-pumped it, and all you do is you just take it off the valve and pump it, and it's supposed to, hold pressure. But then I saw that it was holding pressure. So, but temperature and pressure are very closely related, is I guess the point. And I had a theory that since the car, it says do it on a completely cool car. Now, some people take that to mean as long as, the system isn't pressurized, that should be fine. But perhaps it means, completely cool. Because if the engine is still, or the coolant's still cooling down to ambient temperature, if the coolant is not ambient temperature, that loss in temperature could mean a loss in pressure. And if you think about it, if your coolant is all the way topped up like it is here, there's just a small pocket of air that's creating that pressure. And then if that, air is one temperature and then it's, slowly losing temperature over time, that could be seen as a loss in pressure. Point being is, I didn't see any drips coming out of there. Now, there's many. It could be in the heater core. I mean, God, finding a coolant leak that's not obvious is hard. So I left it overnight, and overnight it initially kind of, well, we'll pull up some pictures and we'll go from there. So here's how I've been trying to track the pressure. Obviously a digital pressure reader would be nice, but hey, this is a loaner tool from the Advanced Auto Parts store. I'm not complaining. And if you have a phone, I would say turn off the motion photo, because what you want to do is you want to look. And now, so let's open up one of these images. We'll go details. So this is at 10:46 p.m. I pumped it up to just beyond, you could see 17 psi there. Then we see here at 11:17, it was a little bit below 17 psi, so lost maybe half a psi in like almost 30 minutes. No, in like 30 minutes, it lost like half a psi. And then by 11:39, so from 11:17 to 11:39, we went down. We maybe lost another half a psi, quarter psi, some amount of psi. Then here we went 11:52, lost maybe another hair. And then 12:06, it seems that it kind of leveled off at right above 16 psi. And then this morning, so we see we went from 12:06 to this morning, we dropped 2 psi. So that was 7 hours, it lost 2 psi. So it's holding pressure, for 7 hours, it held pressure to a certain degree, right? And then we see here, so then I pumped it back up. I'm like, okay, so let me pump it back up based on my theory of it, the engine was cooling off, or the coolant was cooling off. So it was initially at a hotter than ambient temperature, and now it finally, and also at night, everything cooled off just a little bit. So then we see here 7:26 to 9:17, it looks pretty much exactly the same. And here we're at 9:41, and that was the last picture I took. Pretty much exactly the same. Maybe I lost a little bit, I'm not sure. So I did check the ambient or the coolant temperature, and when I checked it, the coolant temperature was 93 degrees. The ambient air temperature was 86 degrees. So it was still a little bit above, but that was after it had already, those initial checks. That was maybe like right around midnight, right before I went to bed. This morning, and actually let's go look at the current coolant temperature. We're gonna check the current coolant temperature. We're gonna use our little OBD2 reader. We're gonna pop that in, and we'll turn this on. So here is the current engine cooling temperature at 82 degrees Fahrenheit, which is ambient air, 81 degrees. So everything's kind of leveled off. So it's gone down from when I last checked it last night, 93 degrees to 82. So I would, and look, there the intake air temperature ticked up a second. So I would imagine that a 10-degree drop could account for that fluctuation pressure. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just being optimistic. I mean, I know the short answer is I have to do a valve cover job, because I did it with like Fel-Pro gaskets, and it is in the spark plug tubes. There is always a little bit of oil when I check. It's not bad, but at some point I'll do that job, and when I do that job, I will reseal that coolant plate. But we could see right now the coolant temperature is matching ambient air temperature. So that is where we're at. So if we're looking at it again, we are at still right that hair above the 15. It may have lost a hair, may not, depending if you're looking here or there, wherever you look at it. I think it's fine. Like I said, I need to do a valve cover gasket. I need to get back there and do that. And I learned after the fact, I did the valve cover gasket job before I even did the coolant hose, so I was even more of a novice, is that there's these little half moon bits that should get resealed. I don't think mine are leaking. Let's see, we see there's one, I believe, down there. Maybe there's another one there. I think so. I thought there was. Where's that half moon thing? There it is. So looks like it may be a little wet there. Not a big deal. So those are the things that I wasn't aware of at the time, unfortunately. Whoever that commenter is, you're right, I should have. And you know, once you're in there, you should do it. But I didn't. So it is what it is. But yeah, so it seems like I'm good. And just a little note, when I did the timing belt, you see I did the timing belt on January 20th of 22, 176, 422,000 miles. It's now at 211, so we're still a little ways out from another timing belt job. I did do a pressure test, but it was on a completely cold engine. It took like 2 weeks for me to do the timing job because I initially did it, and then I needed to order some parts, some little bolts that whoever was in there last had broken and decided not to replace, and you know, I wanted to do a complete job. So it was absolutely, you know, at ambient air temperature. And when I did the test then, it worked. It held pressure. It didn't move an inch. I think it's good now as well. I believe that it's holding pressure. Again, depends where you look at this thing. If you look at it there, if you look at it here, it just depends where you're looking at it. If it is leaking, it's a very, very fine leak, and there's no coolant on the ground or anything like that. One last thing, if and when I do open this thing back up to reseal it, this is the form in place gasket that I would get. If you could see on the video where I brought it down there, you could see that it was a black forming place gasket. I mean, the color doesn't matter. But ASIN, you know, that's the brand of the water pump that I put on in the timing job. That should be the OEM. So this is what I would put on. Last thing is, here's a part list if you're looking to do this job that may be helpful. So let's walk through these parts. Again, I've talked about amayama.com. They have great prices. The only downside is if you need the parts today. I mean, even if you order from dealership, it won't be today, but since it's coming internationally, it'll take a while. And you always want to, sometimes the shipping will make it more than if you just got it from the dealership, so it makes more sense. But for a big bundle like this, I believe it's definitely worth it. So let's go through each of these part numbers, and you can jot these down. So like I said, I would be doing a valve cover gasket and the spark plug tube seals. So those are the first two. That's the valve cover gasket number 2, valve cover gasket number 1. We see the 6 spark plug tubes. Then there's the gasket. There's like a metal gasket between the upper plenum And the lower plenum, then there's the two gaskets from the lower plenum to the cylinder head. Then we see there's the bypass hose, which I would definitely replace. Then we see that gasket for the water inlet, that's for the thermostat. The lower radiator hose, I would just replace that since I'm emptying the coolant. I'd already done the upper radiator hose, but the lower one, I'm pretty sure it's original. And then we have the clip for the fuel filter, and they say if you would disconnect that to disconnect the lower plenum with the fuel injectors, and then they say to replace that retainer, might as well throw it in there. And then the lower radiator supports, those are little rubber bushings. I think I hear like a weird clanking, over bumps, and it may just be that those are worn out. And the upper ones, I had put on some Dorman ones, and for less than $5 each, that would be the time to do it. So that's my note on that. Commenter, you are right. If I was more skilled at the time, I would have done it. I worked with what I had at the time. But it seems like, for whatever reason, this one's holding pressure. It was a little dicey there, but I think that was part of it. The coolant was still warm. It was cooling off. Very small amount of air in there that's actually holding the pressure. So even minor fluctuations will cause a change in the pressure reading. And I did recently get a new radiator cap from Amayama. I've talked a lot about Amayama on this channel. This was like a bargain compared to what it would have been at the dealership. Toyota OEM radiator gasket. Or not the radiator, I don't know, coolant radiator cap, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, there's my note on that. If you have this engine, just some things to, and if you're doing a pressure test, some things to note. Definitely do it on a fully cold engine, just to make sure that, you don't get a false reading that the pressure goes down and it's just because the coolant's going down a little bit. So we see, in the time that we've done this video, I think I started recording like 9:50. It's like 10:05 right now. So it's been like 15 minutes, and that looks about the same. Okay. All right. Thanks for watching.